cover some news, and then I want to open the phones up. Specifically, what do you think the meaning of life is? Is humanity, is decency, is goodness worth fighting for? I mean, do some of you out there think I'm making up how dire our straits are, how real all this is? The globalists are openly saying they're preparing to strike Iran. That will undoubtedly lead to terror attacks going on nationwide, many of which will be staged, as a pretext to make trillions more on no-bid weapons contracts in the next decade, trillions on domestic police state takeovers. Oh, yeah, they spent $1.2 billion just on 3 days at the G20. Again, they fund our destruction with our money. That's a huge payout to them. They are openly giving the Federal Reserve complete power over the entire economy to accelerate the robbing and looting, and they admit in the Washington Post it's at least $600 trillion in derivatives these criminals created, but they say that's a good thing. Now suddenly they're all over the news going, oh, yes, the MMR shot is massively increasing children having seizures. It's good. Oh, yes, your powdered eggs that you get at a fast food restaurant, 900 parts per million. And it goes on in the medical report to say this causes many adults and children to throw up. And that's what people are going, yeah, when I eat powdered eggs, I get a stomach ache. Never knew why. 900 parts per million? Bread can have 100 parts per million? 1 part per million in major studies causes a 10 to 20 point IQ reduction, depending on which study you look at, over a decade if children drink it. I mean, 1 part per million is devastating cumulative poison. 900 parts per million? It's in everything. Look at people. They look poisoned. Even if they're in good shape and exercise, and people look poisoned. They're poisoning us. I mean, I can't even dislike thuggish police anymore. I can't dislike out-of-control tyrants, mid-level anymore, because I realize they're just slaves, too. They're being poisoned. They're being killed. They have no idea. Yesterday, Steve Watson wrote an article about people at the G20, peaceful protesters singing Canada, Oh Canada, the national anthem, peacefully on a street corner, and the police charged them and at full speed and knock men, women, and children down and beat them in the head with batons, and then march around on power trips beating their shields with their batons. And the headline, it's here in my stack, dealt with the fact that snatch and grabs are happening there. I had G20 people on, G20 reporters, and yesterday I was saying, at least you're not having unmarked cars pull up with plainclothes people grabbing people and putting them in vans, like happened at the G20 in Pittsburgh. And they said, oh, no, that's happening, Alex. And then I got off the air and noticed that Steve Watson had posted a PrisonPlanet.com article with video after video. And even the London Guardian, which normally supports the police state, it's pro-establishment, said one of their reporters was just off the street completely and in front of other witnesses, other newspapers reported, because the reporters were all together, that they beat the guy and beat him, and he was begging, saying why, and the cops were just laughing, beating him and punching him in the stomach and saying, stand him up, and then just beat. Well, you know what? See, those mindless cops in a mob, shark-like feeding frenzy of blood and destruction, there is the egghead scientist type that enjoys raw domination as well, but they do it coldly, quietly. They're 1,000 miles away when you're eating those powdered eggs that you get at the fast food restaurant that have 900. Let me just get the article here. Yeah, it's 900, 1,000 to 900 parts per million. I mean, you're drinking the water, you're eating the GMO food, you're being murdered slowly. You think you've got the raw power of the state and it's a religion that you're in charge, and if anybody gives you the smallest excuse, you're going to beat them to a pulp? Well, John P. Holdren, a little cold-blooded control freak scientist, they've got that same area of their mind that likes murder and death and oppression and injustice. And you know what? They're soft-killing you. They're hitting you from a distance. And they know you don't have the mental strength to admit it to yourself. So, I mean, how do you hate some mindless aberration? I don't. I just feel sorry for them. They're like a mad dog. And I noticed that at the G20, it looked like it was fake, and it turned out it was G20 security in plain clothes and in military uniforms grabbing people off the street. And I analyzed the video, and it looked like it was a staged event to create fear so that word would spread. The national media did pick it up, which is another sign it was staged. And, say, oh, my God, they're just snatching and grabbing people. Well, I analyzed the countless videos last night from the G20 in Toronto. It's not fake. They are brutally jumping on people's heads. Plainclothes men are dragging people off to black and blue vans. They are openly setting the precedent to snatch and grab you, put a bag over your head, and Soviet style drag you off to be tortured.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
You know, if it wasn't true that State Department Memorandum 200 calls for a world government to reduce population forcibly, I deserve to get in trouble for it. If it isn't true that Bayer Pharmaceutical, they were caught in court 6 years ago, knowingly for over a decade, mixing HIV with factor VIII blood product for hemophiliacs, if that wasn't true, folks, I'd be sued off the air very quickly. I wouldn't be here. But I go on talk shows. I go on other people's radio shows. I went on Opie and Anthony for an hour and a half this morning. They invited me on. I know it's a very popular program. And I would tell them things like this, and then they would just say, well, that's your opinion. No, it's not my opinion. State Department Memorandum 200 is not my opinion. John P. Holdren talking about putting sterilants in the water, the White House science czar, is not my opinion. United Nations Biological Diversity Assessment saying we want a world government for at least an 80% world population reduction, that is not my opinion. To have the UN and the IMF and World Bank call for a new global government where you pay your taxes to private central banks and every facet of our lives is regulated and controlled to destroy industrial society, that's a quote, is not my opinion. Don't you get it, folks? You can't choose what you want to be real and what you don't want to be real. So if you go to the doctor and they say, Mr. Johnson, you have one of the most deadly types of brain tumors on your brainstem. Generally, at this advanced stage, you may only have weeks to live, maximum 2 months. Please get your affairs in order. And most of the time, I've read in the medical journals, people laugh and go out and say, oh, I'm getting a second opinion, that doctor's nuts. Most people. Now, if you studied 100 years ago, if somebody was told they're terminal, people were tough about it, and they'd say, okay, and get ready. But not Americans, not modern Westerners. We think perception's reality. Oh, that's not true. I don't have a terminal brain tumor. But then later, once they can't walk and they're having trouble breathing, they're there with their family getting their stuff in order. I mean, this isn't a game, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I mean, I was shook up last night. My wife, came in while I was eating dinner, and she came in when I got in bed early last night because I had to get up at 5 a.m., and she said, what's wrong? And I just said, you know what's wrong. You know what's wrong. We've got 3 great children. Unfortunately, I've been right about everything. It's only getting worse. It's all coming to a head. And I just wish I had better powers of persuasion to reach out to people and to get them to understand how serious this is. When the show ended, when I was on Opie and Anthony for an hour and a half, when it ended, the last 2 or 3 minutes, they had it potted up on the ISDN line in our control room here. We did it studio to studio because if stations have ISDNs, we'll do it over that so they have better quality. And I heard the last 3 minutes, they're like, Alex is a nice guy. Yeah, he's a popular radio host, but he is just that, a radio host. He's doing that for ratings, and I'm sure that's not the person he really is. I always get that all the time, or somebody will walk up on the street and say, is your name really Alex Jones? I mean, do you really believe all this stuff you talk about? Ladies and gentlemen, you shouldn't be asking me if I really believe what I'm saying. You should be out finding out if it's true. I wonder, after I talked to those cops Sunday at a barbecue joint, 4 cops eating dinner, I walked over to them and told them about the New World Order, the world government, how sodium fluoride attacks all their organs. If they care about their family, please research it. How they've got decisions to make about what side they're going to be on. And they actually looked like they were, took it and received it well. And one of them said, yeah, I know about the world government. They clearly knew who I was, at least some of them. But I wonder if after I left, they kind of laughed it off, just because they were uncomfortable. And, oh, yeah, tinfoil hat. Let me tell you something. Tinfoil hat, saying tinfoil hat doesn't cover you having chemical weapons put in your food and water. that are guaranteed to reduce the length of your life and to really damage your brain and rob you of your intellect and your psyche. I mean, I respect your mind. I respect your life. I respect your private property. I love my fellow humans. You understand that? I have a deep and abiding love of the truth and of everything good, and it upsets me to see them hurting you. And all I want to do is to see you stand up as men and women and at least go look at the facts so you'll know I'm not lying to you.